Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring a book called Many Lives, Many Masters.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's by a psychiatrist, Dr. Brian Weiss.
hmm
And the book is really his account of, discovering past life regression through his work with a patient.
Interesting. So, like, is he a believer in reincarnation and all that stuff?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this book. He starts out as this total skeptic, a traditional psychiatrist, very science-minded.
Right, right.
And then he meets this patient named Catherine who really shakes up his whole world.
I see. So what's Catherine's story?
So Catherine is this young woman struggling with like really debilitating phobias and anxiety. She's been to a bunch of different therapists, nothing's working.
hmm Tough situation.
And eventually she's referred to Dr. Weiss.
Okay.
And she's super reluctant to try hypnosis, but she kind of gets pushed into it.
So what happens? Does she, like, go under and suddenly start remembering past lives?
Well, not right away. But there's this interesting incident at a museum. Catherine corrects a guide about ancient Egyptian artifacts, even though she has no prior knowledge of the subject. It's almost like a glimpse into a hidden world, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of spooky, actually, like something from a movie.
Right. And that little incident ends up being the catalyst for her past life regression.
Okay, I'm hooked. So what's the first past life she remembers?
Well, Dr. Weiss starts by regressing her back to 1863 BC, and Catherine describes wearing a rough dress, living in this barren valley, doing manual labor.
Whoa, way back. So does she remember anything specific? Like any people from her life back then?
Well, that's the crazy part. She remembers Dr. Weiss.
No way. Get out of here.
Yeah, she sees him as her teacher in this lifetime. She even gives his name as Diogenes. Imagine how freaky that must have been for Dr. Weiss, right?
I can't even imagine. Talk about a mind-blowing experience.
Right, and this is just the beginning. As they continue these sessions, Catherine starts recalling all these other past lives.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so there's Luisa, a Spanish prostitute in 1756 AD, who dies from, like, a waterborne illness.
Wow, so different from ancient Egypt.
Right, and then there's this other life where she's living in this small apartment, and her father is none other than Dr. Edward Poole, the pediatrician who referred her to Dr. Weiss.
Whoa, so many connections.
I know, right? It makes you wonder if souls, reincarnate in groups.
That's true.
And it doesn't stop there. She describes a life as Abby, a black servant in the 1880s. She witnesses a house fire and later dies of chest pain. Then she recalls a life in ancient Egypt again, this time as a Rhonda, preparing bodies for the afterlife.
Interesting. It's like she's tapping into different cultures and their beliefs about death and what comes after.
Exactly. And just when Dr. Weiss is starting to wrap his head around all of this, things take an even weirder turn.
Weirder? How is that even possible?
Well, during one session, Catherine goes into this deep trance and starts channeling what she calls master spirits.
Master spirits. Okay, now we're getting into some serious woo-woo territory.
I know, right? But here's where it gets really crazy. Through these master spirits, Catherine starts revealing incredibly specific details about Dr. Weiss's deceased father and son, like stuff she couldn't possibly have known.
Hold on. So we're talking like verifiable information.
Yeah. Names, dates, personal details. It's mind-blowing.
Wow. That must have been the moment when Dr. Weiss's skepticism finally crumbled.
You can say that again. He's a scientist at heart, but he's presented with evidence he can't ignore. And these master spirits don't just reveal personal info, they also start sharing all these profound spiritual teachings.
Like what kind of teachings?
Well, they talk about souls choosing when to enter and leave physical form based on learning needs. And the importance of paying karmic debts and the idea of soul progression. Like our souls evolve over multiple lifetimes.
Okay, this is heavy stuff, but I'm curious to hear more. So what happens next?
So we left off with Dr. Weiss kind of grappling with, these master spirits and their teaching.
Right, like trying to reconcile all this with his scientific background.
Exactly. But the story doesn't end there. Catherine's journey takes another interesting turn.
Ooh, what happens?
She decides to see a psychic astrologer.
A psychic astrologer. Interesting.
Her name's Iris Saltzman, and she's supposed to be, like, really good.
Okay, so what does Iris tell Catherine?
Well, the crazy thing is, Iris has no clue about Catherine's sessions with Dr. Weiss.
So she's going in blind, huh?
Totally. And yet, what she tells Catherine aligns with so much of what Catherine has already uncovered.
You mean about her past lives?
Yeah. Like, for example, Iris describes Catherine as a sailor in a past life. She even says Catherine had a wounded left hand.
That's pretty specific.
Right. And then Iris mentions brief lives in Paris and as a Native American healer.
Wow, so diverse.
And she also picks up on a lifetime as the illegitimate daughter of a wealthy man.
So it's not just confirmation of what Catherine already knows, but like new information about other past lives.
Exactly. Like Iris is adding more pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
And it gets even weirder.
Weirder? How?
Well, Iris also mentions a lifetime where Catherine was a soldier and involved with horses, and that she wore like this distinctive red and gold uniform.
Okay.
Later on, Catherine independently regresses to a lifetime as an old man. And guess what he vividly remembers?
Soldiers on horseback wearing red and gold uniforms.
Bingo. I mean, come on, how do you explain that?
That's pretty wild.
It's like these independent confirmations are like screaming at you that something really profound is going on.
I mean, it's definitely making me question a few things.
Right. But, Dr. Weiss is still a scientist at heart. So he's careful to acknowledge that, like, this isn't a controlled experiment.
Right, right.
But he does admit that these confirmations from Iris are hard to dismiss as just coincidence.
I can see why.
And while all this is happening, there are some interesting developments in Dr. Weiss's own life, too.
Oh, like what?
Well, his family starts exhibiting, like, heightened psychic awareness.
No way. His whole family.
Yeah, his wife and kids, too. And they all seem to develop, like, this lighter, more joyful outlook on life.
Interesting. So it's like Catherine's journey is affecting those around her, too.
Exactly. It's like this ripple effect. And then Dr. Weiss starts having these vivid dreams.
What kind of dreams?
Well, in these dreams, he keeps encountering this wise teacher figure named Philo. And Philo starts teaching him all these things about, like, the slow path to wisdom and the importance of applying knowledge in a practical way.
Okay.
And the need for balance and harmony in contrast to, like, today's tendency for excess.
I mean, that definitely resonates with a lot of people today.
Yeah, right. Like, maybe we've got it all backwards. And Philo even talks about how experiencing true love and compassion requires, like, a different state of consciousness.
A different state of consciousness. What does that even mean?
Well, it's like he's saying that our current human state isn't like our natural one. We need to tap into something more to really embody these virtues.
Okay, that's pretty deep. So what about Dr. Weiss's work? Does he continue with other patients?
Oh, yeah. And guess what? Each patient reveals their own past lives, further strengthening his belief in reincarnation.
Like what kind of past lives?
Well, there's one who was, get this, a brilliant stockbroker, but lived this super mundane life in Victorian England.
Oh, interesting.
Then there was another who was an artist, but was tortured during the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
And there was even a restaurant owner who couldn't drive over bridges or through tunnels because of a past life trauma where he was buried alive.
Wow, that's intense. So it's becoming clear that this isn't just about Catherine. It's like he's uncovering a universal human experience.
Exactly. And then he encounters a patient who was, wait for it, a television executive in Florence 600 years ago.
A television executive. Back then, come on.
I know, right? But it makes you think, like, what kind of drama were they dealing with back then?
Right. Probably not so different from the stuff we see on TV today.
You got that right. So Dr. Weiss is constantly learning and finding more and more validation for Catherine's experiences.
And of course, becoming more and more convinced about reincarnation.
Exactly. His whole world has been turned upside down.
I bet. But, speaking of Catherine, remember how she mentioned that she was approaching a state of spiritual renewal?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So what does that even mean?
Well, that's a story for the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back. So we're diving back into many lives, many masters.
And picking up right where we left off with that whole spiritual renewal thing.
Right. So naturally, Dr. Weiss wants to understand what that actually means, like what happens during spiritual renewal.
Yeah, I'm curious too. It sounds pretty intense.
Well, luckily, those master spirits, they're there to explain it all.
Of course they are.
And they actually use a really interesting metaphor to describe the process. They talk about, like, a diamond.
The diamond.
Yeah, a diamond with thousands of facets. But all those facets are covered in dirt and grime.
Okay, I'm following.
So spiritual renewal, it's basically the process of meticulously cleaning each facet.
I see. So like polishing the diamond until it sparkles.
Exactly. And each of those facets, they represent different aspects of the soul.
That's a cool metaphor.
So some souls have already cleaned a lot of their facets, and others, they're still working on it.
Right, right.
But ultimately, every diamond, every soul is perfect underneath all that grime.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to think about it.
It's like this message of hope. Like,
Yeah.
no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you have this incredible potential for growth and transformation.
I like that.
And speaking of connections, remember how Catherine recognized her niece from a past life?
Yeah, the one she met at the pool?
Right. Well, she encounters her niece again while
Mhm.
she's in a super conscious state. And she receives this message that her niece is going to be searching for her biological parents
Wow.
and that Catherine is going to be the link to help her find them.
That's wild. So it's like these past life connections are actually playing out in her present life.
Yeah. It's like on some level, her soul remembers those past life bonds
Right.
and it's drawing her back to those people.
I mean, it makes you think like maybe all these people we meet in our lives, they're not just random encounters.
Yeah, like maybe there's this deeper meaning to those connections.
Okay, so what about the niece? Does she actually find her biological parents?
Well, it turns out her niece was adopted, like as a baby,
Huh.
and her parents were like teenagers at the time, and the adoption was arranged through the church.
Okay,
And there's literally no information about them beyond that.
so caption's the only link.
It's like she's tapping into this hidden network of soul connections, you know?
Heavy.
And of course, Dr. Weiss is super curious about all of this. So he keeps asking those master spirits questions.
Makes sense.
Like he wants to know more about those different planes of existence, you know, in the astral realm.
Oh yeah, we talked about those earlier, the 7 planes, right?
Yeah, and the master spirits, they reiterate this concept. They say there are 7 planes, each with multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
And they specifically mention like a transition stage and a stage of recollection.
A stage of recollection. What happens there?
Well, basically, that's where you review your past life, you assess your progress, and you determine those karmic debts you still need to pay.
So it's like a cosmic debriefing after each lifetime.
Exactly, like a time to reflect and plan for your soul's next journey.
That makes sense.
And it all ties back to this whole concept of karmic debts,
Right,
right?
which the master spirits have talked about before.
And they emphasize that if you haven't fully resolved those debts in one lifetime, you just carry them over to the next until you finally learn the necessary lessons and restore the balance.
Like a cosmic balancing act.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also kind of highlights the importance of personal responsibility. Like, our choices have consequences that last beyond this lifetime.
Yeah, that's deep.
But there's hope too, right? We're not just stuck with our past mistakes. We have the power to make different choices and create a more positive path for our soul.
I like that. Makes it less scary somehow.
Definitely. So you're probably wondering how many lifetimes has Catherine actually lived, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's got to be a big number.
I know, right? So the master spirits, they reveal that she's been reborn 86 times.
86. Dang, that's a lot of birthday cakes.
I know, right? Imagine all those experiences. Makes you wonder how many lifetimes we've lived.
Yeah, it makes you think.
And of course, Dr. Weiss asks if Catherine remembers all 86 lifetimes.
Good question. I bet that's a lot to keep track of.
Well, the master spirits, they explain that she only remembers those lifetimes that are relevant to her current growth.
Ah, so it's not like total recall of every single detail.
Nope. It's like our soul has this like selective memory. It only shows us what we need to know when we need to know it.
Makes sense.
And as they're exploring all of this, there's one specific lifetime that stands out. Catherine describes working in this temple, creating these beautiful statues.
Uh-huh.
But she's surrounded by all these religious practices that are like totally rooted in fear.
Oh, that sounds kind of heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder to approach spiritual teachings with a critical mind, you know?
Right, not to just blindly accept everything you hear.
Exactly. To question, to seek understanding, and to trust your own intuition.
Absolutely.
And as if to emphasize this point, a master spirit suddenly appears. And they basically say, hey, our purpose is not to instill fear.
Makes sense.
Like, fear is not the path to real spiritual growth.
So what is the path?
Well, they say that true spiritual guidance comes from a place of love, wisdom, and compassion.
That's nice.
It's like this reminder that our spiritual journey should be joyful and expansive, not filled with fear.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. So, wow, what a journey this has been. I mean, 86 lifetimes. It really puts things in perspective.
It really does. And it makes you wonder about all the experiences we've had, all the wisdom we might be carrying within us.
Yeah, and what we can learn from those experiences to help us in this life.
Exactly. Maybe this deep dive has made you curious about your own past lives.
It's definitely got me thinking.
Well, if you want to explore this more, Dr. Weiss has written a bunch of other books, like Only Love is Real, Through Time into Healing,
Yeah, I've heard of those.
or even Same Soul, Many Bodies.
I might have to check those out.
Yeah, they're all fascinating. But even if you don't read those books, maybe just take a moment to reflect. Consider the possibility that you've walked this earth before
Hmm.
and that your soul holds a wisdom that you haven't even tapped into yet.
That's a cool thought.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into many lives, many masters.
Thanks for taking us on this journey. It's been really thought-provoking.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those little nuggets of wisdom that light up your path.